Our first person seeking their qualified speaker status is Dan Magill here from London. Help me, I'm not funny. Help me, I'm not funny. Dan Magill, let's hear it. And everybody mute, please, if that's what he wishes. Some people don't, but if that's what he wishes.
Yeah, sure, mute, thank you. I want you to imagine you're in the grand final of the World Championships for public speaking. The stage is set and you're on it, about to give the speech of your life. It might be about race, religion, politics, tragedy, disability, even your old school teacher. But there you are on stage, ready to go. But I've just got one question for you before you start. How many jokes are you going to tell? A Toastmaster, Giovanni Cigar, did some research. He studied all the World Championship winning speeches over the last 30 years. And one of the most common elements he found in those speeches was humour. Of all the winning speeches over 30 years, the average number of laughs each speech got was 16. That's 16 laughs in a 7-minute speech. That's more than 2 laughs every minute. And some of these speeches deal with quite serious topics. Not one winner in 30 years had no humour. So if you're going with a speech that's got no humour, you're not going to be standing on that World Championship winning stage. And the lowest number of laughs, in fact, in a winning speech was 7, which is still quite a big amount. So have a think about the last speech that you gave. How many times did the audience laugh, or at least smile? Or how many times did you at least attempt to make them laugh or smile? So why so much humour? Why is it so important? Well, firstly, I don't think it matters what we're talking about, whether it's a technical speech, an entertaining speech, or a more serious one. Your audience, they want to enjoy it. They want to be entertained no matter what. And when you can use humour to add a light touch to a heavy topic, then your audience are going to feel so much more relaxed and comfortable and engaged with what you're saying. And they'll be willing to go to those darker places because they know that you can bring them back to the light too. Secondly, I think adding humour is a skill, of course. Being able to make an audience laugh is not easy. It stands to reason that the best speakers, they're going to want to show you how they can use that tool of humour effectively. So that's why we see so much of it in these higher level speeches. The comedian, who I'm sure you're all aware of, Ricky Gervais, he said, people don't come out and tell you the value of pi to 13 decimal places. They tell you a joke. And that's how we know how intelligent they are. So whatever our message is, whatever we want our audience to take away, humour is always going to be one of the most effective tools to help us achieve those objectives. I remember when I was 10 and I was on a school trip and we were on the bus back from wherever we'd been, probably the candle making factory. We always went to the candle making factory. Our school prepared us well for the real world. We couldn't read, write or spell, but if anyone ever wanted a quick candle, we were there. Anyway, we're on the bus and I'm sat with my friend, Michael, and there are 2 girls in front and they're leaning over the seats and we're all chatting and we're taking it in turns to talk about what we want to be when we're older. Now, Michael, he wants to be a doctor. Show off. Leah wanted to be a vet. Nice. And Geraldine, she wanted to be Madonna. But when it got to me, I didn't know. I really didn't know. I mean, I wasn't completely ready to take candle making off the table, but on the whole, I wasn't sure. But I can remember clearly Geraldine looking at me and saying, I think you'll become a comedian. You're so funny. You always make us laugh, even when you don't try to. But I fell in love on the spot. Not with Geraldine. God, no. She immediately burst into a horrific acoustic version of Vogue. But no, I fell in love with the idea of being a comedian. But fast forward a few years, and I was a shy, nervous teenager. Fast forward another 10 years, and I was doing everything I could to avoid speaking in public. And 10 years after that, I was at the point where I would leave jobs because they asked me to give presentations, and the fear was too big. And I'm not going to add out on any other years because it's starting to add up. But 3 years ago, I walked into a Toastmasters meeting for the first time. And I didn't have much clue what Toastmasters was about. If I was being honest, it looked a little bit like a cult. But I certainly had no intention of speaking. I took my seat and I watched 3 excellent speeches. And during the break, a lady came up to me. She said, "Can I interest you in a topic?" Now I agreed. I assumed it was some kind of delicious chocolate bar. If you were going to set up your own YouTube channel, what would it be about? And that one goes to our guest, Dan. What? I don't have a clear memory of what happened over the next few minutes. I can picture being stood on stage, absolutely terrified. I remember I did speak. I remember the audience were laughing. And I remembered I didn't only sign up to become a member that night. I agreed to compete in the next week's humorous speech and table topics contest. And that night, I realized it was humor that had finally helped me to start finding more confidence. It was humor that I'd used to help myself relax. I'd used humor to tell a story, and I'd used humor to engage the audience. And I won both contests a week after joining. I mean, there were only 3 of us competing. One went over time and was disqualified in both contests. Now that takes some doing. And the other was called Dan too. And you know what Toastmasters judges are like. They get very easily confused. But within a week of starting my public speaking journey, I'd already realized the power of humor. The area contest didn't go so well. There were 4 of us competing in both contests. I think I managed to finish a combined 10th. But that didn't matter because I'd started my journey and I was desperate to learn as much as I could for the following year. And the next year, I won the whole competition to district level. And that was amazing and I was thrilled, and it's one of the best things. But of course, there's also a lot of luck in that, and there's personal opinions of Toastmaster judges, which is always a concern. But with the grand title of District Humorous Speaking Champion, I thought, okay, now I'm going to go and try that stand-up comedy that I so longed to do when I was young. And that's what I did. I went along to a comedy night in London. I did 5 minutes comedy, and it was an absolute disaster. I basically delivered a Toastmaster speech. There were no punchlines, no jokes, no laughs. And I came away feeling pretty depressed. But the more I thought about it, and I thought about what others had done differently on the night, and I thought about what I would need to change about my own delivery and my own thought process, the more things started to fit into place. And I started to do as much stand-up comedy as I could every night. And the laughs started to come. Earlier this year, I went to Calgary in Canada and I did 5 nights of stand-up comedy just every night with some top comedians there. And I realized that just like with anything in life, the trick is to practice. Don't be put off when it goes badly. It has to go badly for you to have any chance of improving. I think if you can stand on stage and try and make people laugh, be that in a speech or a stand-up or whatever you're doing, if you can do that and fail miserably, tell jokes to absolute silence, but remain calm and confident, then congratulations, you've just mastered one of the hardest things to do in public speaking. And that's what we're all here to do. So just keep going back, just keep practicing. What have I learned and what can I pass on to you today? Well, I think let's start with comic inspiration. So many people say to me, they say, I'm just not funny. I don't have any funny stories. I can't think of any funny ideas. Or I'm giving a speech that wouldn't have any humor in it. And I think that's just nonsense because, of course, we all have funny stories and funny ideas. So I'd say start challenging yourself to give humorous speeches more often. It doesn't have to be in a contest, just any time. Just try and give a humorous speech if it's not something you're used to doing. Then challenge yourself to take a more serious speech and work out where humor could fit into that, because there will always be somewhere where you can lighten those heavy moments, or even if it's a more technical speech, there'll be humor that you can find within that. And you'll be amazed at how quickly the ideas start coming. 2 years ago, I remember my friend called me up and said, have you got any ideas for your humorous speech contest yet? And this was the second time I was about to enter. And I didn't have any ideas, but I thanked her for reminding me and said that I'd start thinking about it. And I sat down and I switched on a movie. It was called I, Tonya. You might have seen it. It's about the figure skater, Tonya Harding, who allegedly kneecapped her rival so that she could win. So I watched that movie and I was thinking, okay, I need to come up with an idea because I'd just had that phone call. And 9 months later, I won the district championship with a speech about how I tried to sabotage the previous year's district champion so I could steal his crown. So I think we just have to start looking for ideas, and they're everywhere. Conflict. Conflict is a huge factor in creating humor when you speak. Always look for conflict in a situation. In the sabotage speech that I just spoke about, the conflict was the juxtaposition between the Toastmaster organization, which is good and has high moral values, and me, an unscrupulous Toastmaster hell-bent on doing whatever it took to win the contest. And that's where the humor in that speech played out. If you look at comedy on TV, you'll see the same thing. You'll see humor playing out where there's either internal or external conflict. Probably a lot of you will have seen Curb Your Enthusiasm. Larry David constantly comes into actual conflict with people. Every episode sees him getting into arguments or with different people, and that's where the comedy is in that show. Something like The Office, maybe the conflict is more internal. It's a delusional conflict between who Michael Scott thinks he is, a successful boss who everyone admires and respects, and reality, which is that nobody respects him and people laugh at him rather than with him. So find the conflict and you'll find the humor. Conflict is always what allows comedy to play out. Next, your audience. And this is across the board for not just humor, for anything, but particularly humor. Always consider your audience and how they might differ from the one you spoke to yesterday. In stand-up comedy, a joke can be a huge hit one day and exactly the same joke can bomb the next day. And it's going to be the same with humor in speeches. A joke will live or die depending on how appropriate it is for that very specific audience. I remember winning a division contest in the humorous speech a couple of years ago, and it was the most enjoyable speech I'd ever given. The audience were laughing from the start to the end, and I came off stage buzzing. 2 years later, I flew to Vancouver. Not 2 years, 2 days. 2 days later, I flew to Vancouver, and I went along to one of their Toastmaster clubs to give that same speech. And he's saying, "Oh, we're so excited to have you." And I got there, it was a room packed full of young students who were learning English as a foreign language. And they were all there eagerly waiting for me, the expert, to come in and teach them. They had pens and paper ready, waiting for the pearls of wisdom that I was about to give them. And 7 minutes of complete silence later, with no notes taken whatsoever, I just slumped back into my seat. But this was the same speech to what was technically the same organization, with just 2 days in between. Now, they didn't know who the previous winner of the UK contest was. Why would they? So all my jokes about him were lost. They didn't know Toastmasters quite well enough to get references to general evaluations and jokes I made about boring workshops, and not this one. They didn't even really understand anything I was saying. They just got used to the Canadian accent, which obviously takes some doing, and there I was with my British accent. So always consider your audience every single time. Find out as much as you can about them beforehand, and don't be tempted to push ahead with something just because it worked last time. Delivery. With humor, delivery is obviously absolutely critical. You need to get used to playing with your timing, your energy, pauses, and vocal variety. Here's an example of a joke I did a few months back. Now, don't get excited. It's not the best joke, but here it is. I'm on a diet. The problem is I eat too much pizza. I eat too much pizza, I get fat. I get fat, I get depressed. I get depressed, I eat more pizza. I call it the dominoes effect. Now, okay, I know it's not the best joke, but there's a rhythm to the delivery of that joke. I eat too much pizza, pause. I eat too much pizza, I get fat. I almost play out the domino effect as I'm going through the joke, and then a pause before I call it the dominoes effect. Now, without any work on the delivery of that joke, and maybe a new Toastmaster who's trying to put some humour into a speech would just deliver it something like, I eat too much pizza, I get fat, I get depressed, I get depressed, I eat more pizza, I call it the dominoes effect. And everything there is lost from that. So we can see how everything is in the delivery. That sabotage speech that I won district with, there was a point where I'd done all my sabotaging and the victim was on stage and things weren't going well for him. So he starts panicking and falling back on old jokes. Why did the Toastmaster cross the road? To make full use of the space? Why did he go back to the other side? Because he didn't like his new pathway. Again, not the best. But you can see how adding energy, adding movement, adding some vocal variety and a sense of urgency all add to how successful that joke is going to be. And again, it could have been just delivered like this. He started panicking and falling back on old material. He started telling us jokes like, why did the Toastmaster cross the road? To make full use of the space. Why did he go back to the other side? Because he didn't like his new pathway. And it might still get a laugh, but it doesn't have anything like the same impact. Props. Props can be hugely effective when we're dealing with humour. I think they can have fourfold effects on jokes. So firstly, a prop can be the joke itself. Secondly, they can help to explain a joke. And third, they can give your audience a surprise laugh. I think the best one is probably that sometimes an audience will laugh just at the actual madness of the fact that you've gone to the time and expense to set up the prop. If you have a watch, I'll put the link in, but if you have a watch of the district speech that I gave, you'll see how many different props I use within that speech. I had a framed picture of the previous champion so that people could recognize him. I wore a hat, there was glasses as a disguise, and at one point I even managed to use my shoe as a telephone. Always be thinking of how you can get a prop into a humorous speech. Probably not so much in other speeches. I think it's very difficult to effectively use props in a more serious speech, even though you might use some humor. I think they can be a distraction, but in a humorous speech, always try and use props. Bit of a recap. Comic inspiration is everywhere. Start looking and you'll start finding. Always look for conflict in the situation. Where there's conflict, there's comedy. Know your audience. Work on your delivery, then work on it some more and keep working on it. And always consider a good prop. There's nothing more effective than a good prop. So I want to finish by asking you to imagine you're in the grand final of the World Championships of Public Speaking. Again. The stage is set and you're on it, about to give the speech of your life. Except it's not really the speech of your life because you're not too fussed about winning. What you're craving more than winning is the sound of the audience laughing. And afterwards, people will come up to you and tell you how their favourite bit was that joke that you told. And they'll ask you if you can come to their club or their organisation and make their people laugh. Because God knows everyone could do with a good laugh at the moment. And you're going to be the person who can do that. You'll be the one who can put a smile on people's faces. And there's not a lot in life that's more fulfilling than that. Thank you.